All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Alexa, and I'm on the events team here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Scaachi Koul and Mira Jacob here tonight to celebrate the launch of Sucker Punch. Before we get started, I just want to point out a few things about how tonight is going to go. We're going to do a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so start thinking of some good questions. After the talk tonight, Scaachi will be signing and personalizing books at the table right next to where y'all checked in, and I'll point to that at the end. And if you're joining us on the YouTube live stream, legally you are required to click the link in the description box and purchase a copy of Sucker Punch. All right, the good stuff. Scaachi Koul's first book was a collection of perceptive and hilarious essays reckoning with the issues of race, body image, love, friendship, and growing up the daughter of immigrants. When the time came to start writing her next book, Scaachi assumed she'd be updating readers with her elaborate 4-day wedding, settling down to domestic bliss, and continuing her never-ending arguments with her parents. Instead, the pandemic hit, Scaachi's marriage fell apart, she lost her job, and her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Sucker Punch is about what happens when the life you thought you'd be living radically changes. Everything you thought you knew about the world has tilted on its axis, and you have to start forging a new path forward. Scaachi Koul is a senior writer for Slate and a co-host of the award-winning podcast Scamfluencers. It's a great podcast. She co-hosted the Emmy-nominated Netflix series Follow This, and her writing has appeared on This American Life, in The New Yorker, New York, and The Cut. Her best-selling book, One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter, was a reader's choice. She lives in Brooklyn. Mira Jacob is a novelist, memoirist, illustrator, and cultural critic. Her graphic memoir, Good Talk, was shortlisted for the National Book Critics Circle Award and longlisted for the PEN Open Book Award. Her novel, The Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing, was named one of the best books of 2014 by several outlets, and her work has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, Electric Lit, Tin House, Literary Hub, Guernica, Vogue, and Telegraph. She's a visiting professor of MFA Creative Writing Program at the New School and a founding faculty member of the MFA program at Randolph College. And she, too, lives in Brooklyn. All right, without further ado, please give it up for Mira and Scaachi.
Thank you. Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Actually, I'm very psyched for this.
Oh, good.
Because I had a moment when I was reading this, and suddenly this conversation that we had came back to me. I'm going to give you some background.
Nothing scares me more than this setup. I don't remember this conversation at all.
Okay, to be fair, we were both high. But I will say,
that is a constant for me, so that does not help me either.
We were in Isaac's backyard. And I think we were like sitting in the rain because it was like barely post-pandemic. And you said, I sold a book about who I am, but I don't know who I am anymore.
Oh, wow. I'm smart. I wish I could have heard that a little clearer. I would have wasted so much of my time. I don't remember that.
It was amazing. And I sort of looked at you like, wow, what is that about? And then you said, my editor says that I won't know who I am till I come out the other side of this.
Yeah, they were all right. Yeah, they were.
Did you come out the other side of it?
I think so. I hope so. I look different. Yeah, it didn't feel like there was any other way to do it. I do think it's really corny to talk about art like I had to do it. It was an imperative. Nothing is. That's kind of the point. You don't have to do anything. That is the thing I have learned the most in the last few years. Nothing is an obligation. But I did feel like I wasn't going to feel like a full person until I figured out whatever I was trying to figure out here. I sold a book of essays about conflict before I even got married. So my plan was to write this book that was going to be about the utility and futility of conflict, which I still believe in it, just maybe in a very different way. And then I was like, man, I can't figure out this book about fighting. Oh, I am fighting with my husband a lot. I wonder if that's related. And then I just thought about that for like 7 years. And then when I started the divorce process, I remember thinking like, oh, this is why I couldn't write a single word.
People, okay, so the reviews are calling it a divorce book.
Yeah.
Do you call it a divorce book?
Sure. It's whatever I think you want it to be. I don't get too genres are a tricky thing. And I don't really care what people call it. I think if you read it and you feel like it's a divorce book, great. If you were reading it because you like to read a cancer book, what's wrong with you? But that's available to you. You know, I think it's whatever you'd like it to be. But I think it's a book about cleavings and endings and calamity. You know, I had all these plans. I moved here pre-pandemic. I was going to get married. I had all these ideas about what I was going to do and what things were going to look like. And more than anything, I really wanted to present like I knew what the fuck I was talking about.
Fair.
That was really important to me. And what a waste of my time. Because I spent so much energy trying to do that. And then I failed anyway. And I still had to stand up in front of everybody I know and say, hey, I know you like flew out and spent thousands of dollars for this 4-day wedding. And I like made this big bet and I did it really noisy. Do you know where I can live? I need an apartment. I don't know how to like have a credit score. Where do people get couches? So it was just like everything was gone. All of the artifice in my life had completely shaken off. And so divorce feels like one piece of that.
Yeah, for sure. You also dedicated the book to your mother.
Yeah.
And
my dad's so mad about that. He's so mad. The first one I dedicated to both of my parents, and he was already like, fine, like I'll share. And this one, he's like, well, you act like I wasn't even there for your life. I'm not really sure he was, but like, I don't know.
Did he read your first book?
No, he didn't even read my first book. My mother did. And her review was, oh, sad. And that was correct. And we didn't need to do more than that. But I don't know that they'll read this one. I think this might just be too, you may as well just put needles in your eye. Like, why would you read this kind of book about your own child?
You really don't think they're going to read it?
No, I don't.
Wow.
My dad has no curiosity about my creative life at all. He exclusively wants to know sales figures, reviews, and enemies. Like, who has said anything negative, and then he like will go, like, if you leave a negative comment on any Slate article, he will find you and then call me and be like, he's an accountant. Okay.
Why dedicate a book about divorce to your mother?
It's tricky because it's not like you want your mom to leave, right? You don't want her to leave. You don't, because you recognize that there was this point where she could have been somebody else. She's not. She won't be, and that's like a thing you have to make peace with if you want to. And I don't think my parents had the kind of relationship I had. That was part of why I realized I needed to get a divorce. It wasn't like that. They had the rhythm of the love language of like argument. They did sort of get how conflict was connective and how it made sense to them. And I still talk like that. I'm a nightmare. Like, I didn't like improve overnight. I'm still very difficult socially. But there was always a point for my mom where she could have just been a completely different person. And I think it's really uncomfortable and very painful when you're the daughter of a woman and you think about like, oh no, she was just like some girl. And then she had to do all this shit. And I am making a very conscious choice to not do any of it. I don't want to do any of it in any context. So it's not like, it's hard to frame because you don't want to frame it like this is a regret or this is a pain or that she has made a wrong choice. It was just a choice. But in that sliding door, it's hard not to think like, this is why this is so painful for her. This is why leaving was so painful for her, because it is a witness into this avenue that like she also didn't really conceive of. None of us thought I would get divorced.
Do your parents had an arrangement?
Yeah, they had like a friendly one. Like it was a friend.
But it wasn't like a love marriage.
It was not a love marriage. They were arranged, but my mom was allowed to pick. My dad was obsessed with her. And she thought he was fine. And he, all 5'1" of him, very impressive. So, but she could have said no, she didn't. But they didn't have like, they didn't meet over Lussie and fall in love. That wasn't happening.
It's really interesting though what you say about the fighting, because I think my parents also had an arranged marriage, and there is something really hard to explain, which is that sometimes the intimacy of fighting feels a lot like love.
Yes, it's all they have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you think about it, when you like meet someone relatively recently and you have conflict with them, to get to the point to have a fight requires intimacy. To get there is even that there has to be closeness. And so that's part of it. So in that dynamic, I can see how it's something they reached for. But why am I doing it? And I don't have to do it just because it's what I saw. It's not that fun. I don't really like it. I don't know what it's giving me.
Have you changed?
No.
No. You talk about how your ex asked you not to write about this.
Yeah.
Several times.
It worked.
What was the decision to write about this like? Was it a decision?
Nope. Nope.
How did it happen?
I just did it. There was no decision to be had.
Uh-huh.
How many times can I offer the narrative to somebody else? How many times can I say, okay, fine, you can tell it? Like I've been doing that for years. I've been doing that through my whole life, but in my 20s, especially through my marriage. How many times could I prostrate myself to hope that this person would get me accurately? He wasn't. He couldn't even see me. Nobody could. I couldn't see anything either. I was like desperate for somebody to be able to acknowledge me and see me clearly and witness me with clarity, and I couldn't do it. How could I get that from anybody else? But it wasn't a decision. The details, what I said, and how I framed it happened over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew as soon as I was moving out, whatever I was going to do about this stupid fucking book I had on contract for 7 years at this point would have to be about it. There was no way.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you guys, after I'm done with my questions, you are going to be able to ask questions too. So just get them in your mind, hold them in place, because I'm sure a lot are coming up. You mine your life a lot.
I do?
Yeah. You talk about mining your life a lot in this.
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, it's such a funny question, but what do you think is the hardest part of that? Because I find that there are many hard parts of it.
Yeah, I wrote a little bit about it in the book. I think the worst thing in the world is people understand you very clearly. That doesn't feel good. Or it shouldn't, because if they do understand you clearly, then they're getting a really dynamic look at you, and people are really odious. And I am too. That is the worst case scenario, and it keeps happening.
Like they know you now.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a portion of me. It's not all of it. I always say like this book is probably like 25% of whatever the full story is, because it's only mine and it's only a version of what I will give you still. And I don't have to do all of it.
Yeah.
I don't need to. There's no need. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm offering you something. I'm offering you an intimacy. I think you read it and you do certainly get some sense of me. It would be disingenuous to be like, no, the art is merely static and it has no relationship with me.
Do you have kind of questions that you ask yourself before you decide to publish something?
Like about someone else?
Yeah. Because I mean, there's the writing of it, which I also do. But is there a like, let me think through this before I put it out in the world?
Yeah, but I mean, no one will believe me. But all the drafts start with very few details. Like it's not like I start with the most fiery version and then slowly peel back because the lawyers are telling me to. I'm actually extremely lawyered, so I start from that panic.
Mm-hmm.
So it was work with my editors to actually get me to the place where I could fully say things that I needed to say in order for it to make sense. I've read a lot of books like this where you read them and narratively you feel like something is kind of lacking, and it is because the writer does not want you to fully access that space with them, because you will then get to know them. I get it. I don't like this. I'm having a terrible time. But that's the only way to do it. But it took like a lot of drafts, and all the drafts started really interior and really internal. I can tell you anything I want about myself. That's my right. I think the only people I'm super protective of in that space are kids.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, my niece has no contract with me to be involved in this. So she's not, but
you're a fearsome niece.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm so afraid of her. She turns 15 in 2 weeks.
Oh no.
And I am going to change my phone number.
Okay, can we talk about cheating?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that made me like say a lot of things to my living room when I was reading this is you write about your husband having an affair with a white woman.
Yeah.
Why in particular did that hurt?
There's There was just, did you hear it? Like a knowing murmur from all the women of color in the audience who were like, I know exactly why. You already feel like there is some disconnect when you are a woman and you're a woman of color and you're dating a white man and a cis white man. There's a very specific dynamic. There are lots of variations of this. I'm speaking about this one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very specific dynamic that comes into play, a power dynamic that comes into play. And a feeling that you are still secondary because he can go back and pick somebody else. That is always, is often an undercurrent in unhealthy versions of this dynamic. And I don't know if I had fully accessed that feeling until I found out. And then it was it was always there. I didn't even think about it. Because I was so much younger than him that I was always presented like this treat. Like I'm this Lolita, I'm a candy, like I'm disposable. So that cuts this like racial element too. Yep. I didn't think about it. And so it was so, the title of the book, like the sucker punch of it was like the first one. I was so shocked. I could not believe it. But it was so much worse. And it was hard to explain to people too. They couldn't comprehend why it was worse.
It was worse to you than if it had been an Indian woman.
I think that also would have made me insane for another reason. And I don't I don't actually have enough time for the therapy that I require for that like fantasy catastrophe.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking about it because then it sent me into sort of a spiral in my living room where I was like, yeah, I'd be pissed. I'd be more pissed if it were a white woman, but I'd definitely be more threatened if it were an Indian woman.
See, leave me alone.
Okay.
Later. You can do that book through.
Isaac wanted to know.
He's not even here. He's not even in the country. He's been named twice.
This is what we do to you. Okay. This is what your friends do to you. Isaac wants to know about how you use wit and humor as a shield and sometimes a cudgel.
Okay, first of all, big words from a guy who like got sad, so he walked for 5 years. He turned his whole life into a walking blog, and he's this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. What was the question?
Okay, he wants to know: do you use them?
I use it as
a defense mechanism?
I'm an asshole. No. Obviously not. Do you want to read a book that's like 250 pages of like lumbering details about the most devastating thing that happened to me? Or would you like to hear a joke about a butthole? Like, I don't really want to make everybody drink medicine. Doesn't sound that fun. So why not? You may as well. Like, and you're going to be sad anyway. You lots of reasons. Look outside. Like, there's plenty of reasons to be devastated. You may as well, have a laugh at Isaac's expense now and
then. There is a part of this book that really surprised me, which was a close read.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we just
talk about that? Second. It's the second chapter. It's a cruel structure.
It's incredible though. It's incredible. It's the writing in it is extraordinary, but also the emotional piece that you're twirling around like this and looking at and looking at and looking at. Can we talk a little bit about what that is about so that they know?
Yeah.
And then what you had to do to write that piece?
So my first book, I wrote a chapter called A Good Egg, which was about a friend I had in university, and he was a drinker, and he was sort of hard to manage, and about this kind of complicated, semi-violent relationship we kind of had. I wrote it over and over again. I had published it online. I had written it in all these different contexts, and I published it in the book. And I thought I had like a really keen understanding of what that story was. As my marriage is falling apart, we're in the pandemic. I turned 30 in the pandemic. I'm thinking more and more about this chapter and about the people that I've written about in it. And it's very strange to feel betrayed by your own recorded memory. Not just the memory that you have in your head, but that you have written down. You've committed this to record. So now all these other people have it too. And I was increasingly agitated by it because I was starting to feel it in my marriage. Mm-hmm. I knew I had also set this record up about my relationship, and that wasn't true. No matter what I did about it, it wasn't an accurate record. So I got back in touch with this friend from university, and I started writing about him passively, trying to write this book. It's not coming together. And And while getting back in touch with him, I started to reconnect with some of these memories that had happened and what had happened. It took me 12 years to call it rape, to be able to say that that's what happened. It's not just a violence.
Yeah.
It didn't grab me. It wasn't like an assault, which it was, but like we have words for a reason. And I was so amazed that I had obfuscated from myself so effectively that I didn't even really know what had happened. And I kind of had to get back in touch, and I wanted to ask, I didn't. But the chapter in here, a close read, is a reassessment of that first chapter, but also just of everything that had happened.
Yeah, there is something. Have you guys read Kiese Lehman's Heavy? So there's a way in which memory works in that, right? It's this. It's one of the things that he allows himself to do as an author is to revisit the same situation over and over and over, and let that shift on the page. And it's a really interesting thing because it sort of challenges you to wonder who the narrator is, but it also indicts memory in a way, right? Indicts like the person that holds the memory, and the writing down of it. And I just want to say, because when I see something brave on the page, and I don't mean that in like a cheesy, but I mean like a writing way, like a writing brave thing, that was fantastically beautiful. And it also, I think, gave me a kind of permission. Like reading that, did that one of those little things. Sorry, I know it's terrible for me to compliment you in public.
I don't like
I'm so
it.
sorry.
Yeah.
I know, I see your eyes.
I'm
I see
really
your eyes.
struggling.
I know. I'll stop in a minute.
Okay.
But I will just say, it was really, I think when I read it, I was like, oh, you're doing something new here. And it felt markedly different to me even than some of the other essays I've read from you.
Yeah. I mean, it's uncomfortable to admit that you got the record wrong when all you do is deal with record. Like, I don't want to, I'm not happy about it. It is still a slight embarrassment. But I also was thinking about it more because I was doing all this work in reporting and in documentary spaces about these Me Too stories and talking to women who had been assaulted. And I'm asking them, like, hey, can you sit here often in front of a camera or in front of a recorder? Can you tell me about your worst day? Like, can you tell me everything that happened from the beginning to the end? Can you tell me like who you told and how it affected your life? And then like later when you tried to kill yourself, can you tell me about that? And I couldn't do that. I couldn't even do it in the product that I had control over. I couldn't do it in a product where I have a degree of separation from the audience. I couldn't even say it to myself. I couldn't even confront the person who had done it to me. I never said anything. And I had spent all these years asking people to do it for me and promising them that there was like a reason for it and there was a justification and it would help them. And I believed it, but I never did it. And that's what bothered me. That was the cowardice that offended me about myself.
Fair. Okay, I'm going to let you guys ask. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to them for a little bit, and then we'll wrap us up. One of the things that happens in here is you say of all the people that you broke the divorce to, it was your parents that you were dreading the most. Can you tell me what that was like? Why them of all people? Because you're a grown adult.
Yeah.
But let's talk about,
I don't know why I stuttered. Sure.
But also, I think there's something specific to Indian family when I read that. Can you talk about that?
I mean, first of all, they treat divorce like leprosy. Like they're so afraid of it. And nobody in my family had ever been divorced.
Divorced.
Thank you. I didn't think they would know what that meant, so I was trying to help. The closest we'd had was like there was one auntie who she like didn't pay her taxes for 10 years, and she just like fled the country. And then uncle got remarried and had a baby at like 55.
Of course.
And I was like, did they get divorced? And my mom's like, no, we just moved on. I'm like, so like there's no like the legality of it remains very loose amongst the Kashmiris of Western Canada. My dad had such a outlandish reaction when I first met my ex because he was white, he was older, and he didn't speak to me for a year. My first book ends with him not speaking to me, and I didn't know if he was gonna get his shit together. I couldn't decide if I could do that again. That was what my big question was. If I tell them that I have accessed a level of misery that is so dynamic that I don't even have language for it, can I accept that that might mean that I am cut off from my family again?
Oof.
And they were older. They were in their 70s by that point. Can I do this to them in their 70s?
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, it was like, yeah, I can, and I will.
Yeah.
And the thing is I wasn't even hiding it very well. You know, when I FaceTimed them to tell them, I couldn't even get the words out. I just started crying. My mom wasn't in the room. She could not see my face. She was in the kitchen, and she yelled from another room, "Are they getting a divorce?" She said it properly too. She said divorce. She knew. Yeah, she was like, "This is a modern problem." I got to lock in on American English.
Oh my God.
But she knew. There was no, it wasn't even like, did she get hurt? No other question. She knew. So what was I hiding it for? Everybody did. I would call friends and be like, "Hey, I'm getting a divorce." And they're like, "Oh yeah, all right." I don't think anybody said like, "Oh, okay." Like, people were congratulating me and then being like, "Wait, am I supposed to say that?" And then like, not like, I wasn't hiding it well at all. I was getting nothing from the performance, and I was getting nothing from the actual act of it.
Amazing. Okay, we can take some questions now. Who's got a question? Someone will have a question. Yeah.
This is kind of taking a question from a recent event that we did with Haley Melodic for her book No Fault. And one of the attendees asked if Haley kind of felt like she was part of something bigger in this kind of wave of literature and writing about divorce and about relationships and open marriages and all of the complications and intricacies within. And so I'd like to pose the same question to you and ask if you feel like you're a part of something, or if you've drawn any inspiration, or at least, I don't know, any sense of like solidarity or something like that with all the other writers.
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat it for these people. So the question is, do you feel like you are part of something larger in terms of books that are exploring marriage and divorce and all the different ways that relationships can or can't work out?
Yeah. I loved Haley's book too. It's so good, and it talks a lot about some of the same stuff in like a very different tone, which is so interesting. I do think I'm part of that continuum. I think there have always been books about divorce. It's not like a new thing, but obviously we're talking about it a little bit right now. I think generationally, there's just a bunch of writers who like turned 35 and like we turn to our husbands and we're like, I don't know about this. So that's one big piece of it. But, you know, I don't know. I think a lot of women just kind of got fed up at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the elections have foisted a lot of malcontent into the forefront, and it's harder and harder to create cognitive dissonance between what we know is right and men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're trying. I know. So yeah, I do think I'm a part of it, but it's also, you know, I mean, divorce books used to have to be about like the worst abuse you'd ever heard in your life. That was the only way the woman was writing about it. It was like, he beat the shit out of me and that's how I persevered. Mm-hmm. And now you have books like No Fault or like Sucker Punch, which is just like, I didn't like it that much. It just wasn't my bag. And I'm going to go. And that is a relatively modern advancement of that kind of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else? Yeah.
What have you learned about like love from this?
Nothing. Literally nothing. I cannot help you with that. Yeah, I'm not the right person to ask that question to.
The question was, what have you learned about love? Just for
I don't have. I wish I had an answer. I've learned lots of other things about like vengeance, bile, but not. Yeah, I don't know. Do you know anything?
Well, so one thing I would say is I've started rewatching the whole Sex and the City series because Kristen Davis has a new podcast out called "Are You a Charlotte?" and she like goes through the whole
Whoa.
thing again.
Wow.
And so in one of the very first episodes, Misty Big says to Carrie, like, "Oh, your problem is like you've never been in love," and like it's a whole like sucker punch to her because she's like, "You're right."
Right.
Like,
but she's obsessed with being in love, so
Yeah.
it's especially galling. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm sort of saying is like, like I'm divorced too, and my marriage also fell apart during the pandemic, and like I think getting married is an act of bravery. Getting divorced is brave too. Like,
Yeah.
everyone said to me like, "Holy crap! Like what you're doing is so brave. Like just that you know that you want to get divorced. Like you're not kind of hanging in there. Like you're just like I just made a choice. Like this is happening. I'm done." Like, did you feel that way too? Like just a sense of like I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The day I was gone, I was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. It's a hard to say. You're right. It's brave. It is brave to get married. It's a risk. It's so stupid. Like it's objectively very dumb. I don't necessarily think people shouldn't do it, but it's like financially stupid. It's emotionally reckless. It's like in terms of your like what kind of protection you have as a person in capital. It's not like real bad. It's bad choice. So yeah, it is brave to do it because it's stupid. And then getting divorced is also brave because you are also entering into the unknown with nothing. You don't know what the hell you're going to do with yourself. So I don't begrudge anybody either decision. I mean, people get married. Some of my closest friends are married,
All right, who else?
So when you're talking about kind of correcting your own record, did realizing that you had either misremembered or misplaced memories, did that influence how you've taken account of your own life now? Like apart from writing the book, like the way that you journal, the way that you like document your life, and did you feel like you didn't properly document your life at that time, or that you were just like removed from it in a sense?
Do you have to repeat this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
The question is, in revisiting the documentation of your life, have you revisited what that means?
Yeah, and also just like your
do I keep a record differently?
Yeah.
Did it influence like how you choose to document your life as a person who writes about their life?
Yeah, I kept rigorous records. I just never looked at them. They were like I had kept all these notebooks of everything that ever happened to me, and it was like I was building little bricks of TNT and leaving them in my home and being like, well, I hope nobody comes in with matches because that would be unfortunate. I just never looked at any of them. Once I left, I started reading 10 years of journals. It was all in there. Like my misery in Technicolor, in notes, in grocery lists, in like verbatim conversations about 1,000 things, not just that, things about things that had happened in my family, between me and my mom, like all over the place. I just didn't look at it. I had so expertly dissected myself into two, one person who was trying to just get through the world and the other person who was having this argument at home. And I could not have the two meet. That was the mistake. I kept great records. I just didn't consult them. I did no analysis. I made no effort to make sense of what was happening.
I have a follow-up question. Do you think in some ways the pandemic forced, you said you couldn't have those two meet?
Yeah.
Do you think in some way the pandemic made, for many women, it forced those two to meet?
Yes. Yeah, there was no distraction. There was not like you're just home all the time. Like I have to talk to you all the time. Like and on top of it, it forced a conversation with myself about myself. I'm asking this person to like me. I don't even like me. Like what is he supposed to do about it?
Yep.
That wasn't fair either. I think everybody sort of had that like wait, we die at the end of this and this is like what I'm going to waste my time doing?
Everyone did have that. We 100% had that. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Going along with this idea of like collecting record and recapping memory and that kind of thing, do you feel like there is one chapter in this book that you would like to take a closer look at in the way that you did with the chapter from your first book?
In this one?
Yeah.
Like in a few years that I would want to look at?
Repeat the question.
Oh. It was, is there a chapter in Sucker Punch that I will want to reassess in the same way I reassessed the
Yeah.
chapter from the first
Yeah.
one?
That's really interesting.
That's a good question. I hope they all feel outdated. I think I used to feel really anxious about when I would read old work and it didn't feel like it made sense anymore. I wasn't connecting in the same way, or I felt like I had outgrown it. And now I am grateful for that. If I'm reading old work and it still feels like I'm in that place, that's embarrassing and bad. So I hope the whole book feels in 10 years like, oh, I wrote this 10 years ago. I was 30. I hope it reads like that. So all of it, ideally.
Do you ever have that thing when you're writing where when you're writing about your own life, it's almost like some grit gets into a chapter and you're like, this isn't quite right, but it's
Yeah.
not quite wrong.
Yeah, I just got to get this out the door.
Yeah, but there's like something there, and
Yeah.
it's probably going to turn into a pearl or whatever the
Yeah,
hell.
it'll come up later.
But
Yeah,
like you
whatever
know
it
that it's
is.
there. You just feel the
Yeah.
lump, and you're like, and now I must publish.
Yeah, I mean, life is long,
Yeah.
so some other tragedy will befall me, and I'm sure it will make me reassess whatever one I wrote about in this one.
Yay! Over here.
I think writing in shorter form, like essays, and then also writing about personal material, which can be really layered, it's really hard to know where to start and where to end. And I guess my question is, how do you navigate that? Or like, what's your relationship to beginnings and endings?
Okay, what's your relationship to beginnings
my
and
God.
endings? How do you know where to start and to end when it's your own personal material?
That question also came from someone I work with, which is just like it's like a drive-by shooting. It's a great question. I don't know. With this, I feel like I was just sort of entering it in whatever way I could because I didn't know what to do. I had written passages over years for this book, and I kept sending it to people and being like, "What about this?" And they're like, "It's bad. Whatever you're doing is bad." And I had like this really industrious weekend where I wrote 20,000 words and was like, "Okay, I'm gonna send it. This is it. I figured it out." And then on Monday, my computer crashed, and the only thing it deleted was that document.
Oh my God.
It was my BuzzFeed laptop, which feels
So
pointed. But the cloud somehow caught the first 3,000 words, but everything else was gone, completely deleted. That 3,000 words is still in there. It's part of the first chapter, and it's also rewritten in the last one because it's the only part that I had written when I was still married that I had. Because everything else I had to write after. So I started with that. I had this. It was an inaccurate portrayal of what was happening. And all I could do was just go narratively from there and build it like that. And then the framework using these deities, that was the last thing that came in. Because I had these essays and they felt like they were kind of unmoored and floating, and I needed to tie them in. And then I had these statues behind my head where I was typing that were watching me do this, and I realized that was what it was. Yeah.
Okay, great. What else? Yeah, in the back.
Hi, Roz.
One of the things I loved about your book was it was such a redemption of like the trope of the angry woman, and you write about conflict in so many different ways and how it's like neutral, but also how it has value too, and brings truth to relationship. And for the people who haven't read your book yet, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that and if it's changed since the book finalized.
Okay, so can you talk about the redemption of the angry woman, and has that changed? Has that changed?
Well, just like your understanding of conflict.
My feelings around conflict, how it's changed. I love being mad. I don't know why people don't like being mad.
Well, you're good at
It
it.
feels so good. I like it when my heart feels like it's going to burst. I think it's really healthy. I still think conflict is incredibly helpful. Like, I don't see the value in pretending like things are okay when they're not. I don't think you can have friction-free existences. I think that kind of conversation of like, should we be polite? Like, that's such a like I was going to say pre-fascism conversation, but I don't know when that would have been. So I can't tell you. But I still think it's incredibly instructive. What I won't do anymore is waste my fucking time trying to get somebody to recognize my humanity when they have no interest in doing so. I used to waste a lot of time doing that. I would do it on the internet.
Yep.
I was doing it in my relationships. I was doing it in my friendships. I did it all at work. I was doing it all the time. And now I think I'm a lot better at being like, oh, you don't like this?
Mhm.
Great. We never have to talk again. That's so easy. I don't have to have every fight. I can. I have the highest capacity for conflict that I've ever had. I am the best at it that I've ever been, and I have the least interest in it than I've ever been.
Like a prize fighter.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like Tyson when they bring him out for one of the Pauls. Like, I'm just, it has to be like a lot of money.
Yeah, in the back.
Hi.
Can you just talk about how your relationship with yourself evolved post-divorce and kind of the extent at which you maybe were rediscovering parts of yourself that were beautiful or kind of reinventing things where you realized, hey, like I can be this part or this part and it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Can you talk about rediscovering yourself post your divorce and discovering different parts of yourself?
I had been with the same person from 20 until 31. That's like a really long time.
It's also a very intense time.
It's like all of the formative years. That's like when you're supposed to learn how to do something. And I didn't have to learn how to do anything. So for all of, his complaints that I couldn't take initiative, he was right because I never had to. There was no reason to. I didn't have that infrastructure. It was also how my parents functioned, right? My mom had that she ran the house for sure, but I knew who paid the bills and my dad worked and I understood like how that structure, how that family structure worked. And so in the divorce, I had to figure out if I was capable of anything. I did not know how to find my own apartment. I had not had my name on a lease since I was 20. I had come here from Canada, right, a year before the pandemic. My credit score was like 4. Nothing was in my name. I had no, I would go to the bank and they were like, you have the financial health of like a 13-year-old immigrant. Like there's no, I had no record of anything. I didn't own anything and I didn't know how to do anything. I also did not know how to be by myself. Like the yawning chasm of solitude after you've had somebody in your fucking ear for 11 years is a really weird and agonizing adjustment to make. And the biggest part about that is that when you have to make a decision or when something goes wrong, you are the only person you're consulting. There isn't anybody else who's going to tell you that this is how it goes. And you don't have that place to put your faith and say, I trust that this is going to work out because this person who I'm with tells me that it's going to work out. You're on your own. And I like that. I'm grateful for it. I figured it out and I'm glad I figured it out, but it sucked for sure. But I'm glad to know it.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
A lot of your work obviously is focused on Me Too, about abusive relationships, and having sort of processed this through your own lived experience, has that changed or shaped how you would sort of approach these kinds of projects or reporting, whether it's how you conduct interviews, whether you take these things on in the first place moving forward?
Yeah, the question was if this has shaped how I look at Me Too reporting. Is that right? Me Too reporting and source work. I'm much more understanding and accommodating of women who don't want to confront whatever happened to them. I get it way more now. Like, why would you want to? So it took me this long to do it myself. And I'm a stranger and I'm asking it of somebody and they don't have control over the product. So I get the reticence more than ever. I understood it before, but now I really understand it. And I see the nuance of it, the back and forth sometimes sources have where they want to talk and then also don't because they recognize it's important that the record be there and also very anxious about being a part of it. So I get that a little better.
Anyone else? Oh, Alexa's got the one more. Okay, one more question. Yeah.
Hi, Scaachi.
Hi.
Do you feel a desire to write about dating now that you?
Do I feel a desire to write about dating? I mean, I tried. They're not sending me their best. So anything I write about dating is just going to be like a catalog of like natural disasters. It's not, I don't know, say what about it? Yeah. Not dying to write about it.
Okay. Okay. I just have one more question for you. When in the process did you get the Mandy tattoos?
Oh, immediately.
Okay, can we just talk about that for 2 seconds?
Yeah, I always wanted them.
Yeah. Do you guys know what those symbolize? Do you know what that is? Why the Mandy? Yeah. Say it.
I don't know which.
Well, because
version are
it's
you telling
usually,
me?
but I'm just saying, like, usually you do it in
Oh,
a
wait.
marriage ceremony.
Oh, yeah. So usually you get it up until your elbow. That's what you get when you're getting married. And the darker it is, the more your husband loves you. That's the old adage. It obviously works. Mine was very dark, so it definitely works. I just always wanted hand tattoos, and everybody in my life was such a bitch about it. And then after I got a divorce, I was like, well, I can do whatever I want. Nothing matters.
It's the best. Okay, gentlemen, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. For those of you still joining us on the live stream, please click the link and you can buy Mira's books as well as Sucker Punch. And we also have her memoir Good Talk up at the desk along with Sucker Punch. And we're going to be forming a very neat, polite, super nice line down the middle. Because when y'all stand up, we're going to start closing up these chairs and making it look like a bookstore again. And then if y'all turn, you can see where my lovely coworkers are pointing. That's where Scaachi's going. Oh, it's so exciting. Okay, thank you guys so much. Please give another round of applause.
That's great.
Great.
That was fantastic.